this is my very out of control variegated string of hearts, which best guess is way longer than me, but I don't know for sure. What we're gonna do today is try to untangle this thing so that I can measure it, because I really wanna see how long it is. And then we're going to propagate it, which means chopping it up into a lot of very tiny pieces. So I've got trays, I've got some of these that I trialed about 6 weeks ago actually, some successful cuttings, a few that I've tried to root in water, and I'm gonna show you the results of all of those things. But first, let's see if we can get this thing untangled. Now this thing starts off as only 3 strands, but it does branch out a little bit, and there's a couple of ways that we can propagate this thing, but now that I know the most effective and fastest way, we're going to do that for sure, which is cuttings. Did I get it? Okay, my table's in the way a little bit, but there's the end. And we have roughly 141 inches, which is 11 feet, 9 inches. Holy. Unfortunately, it's not gonna be 12 feet for long because I really wanna propagate this. It starts off as only 3 strands, and I'd rather have a lot, like 25. Is that too much to ask? I'd rather have 25 of them that are maybe 2 feet long instead of 3 that are this long, because it's just too hard to manage. I've had this wrapped up, hooked over a windowsill for probably 6 months, and it's just gone wild. And you can easily prune these things, cut them to keep them under control. I just didn't. So let me show you these ones that I already did. Now, I didn't cut the longest of those. I cut some other pieces off when I propagated these, and I took roughly 6-inch long strands and I laid them on the surface of the soil, and they have all successfully rooted. I didn't see any dieback, and they're even starting to trail. The longest one, I think, being these ones right here. But each of them only have about 3 strands coming off of them, and I really want more. Now, I'm not going to keep all these. They're going to be, most of them, for Valentine's Day sales. And what happens when you lay these on top of the soil is they grow roots at each of the nodes where the leaves come out. So because each piece, and I've checked them, it's attached to the soil everywhere there is a leaf node. So I'm going to actually clip the vine in between each of those leaf nodes on these ones that I've already rooted. And that is hopefully going to mean that each leaf node starts a new shoot. So we'll check back and see how accurate that's going to be. There we go. Okay, so those are going to go back down. I have a big setup in the basement with lots of lights and heat mats and everything for these, so that is where they're going to go. Coffee break. Now, I have 2 of these propagation trays ready. They have holes in the bottom of each of these cells. The trays on the bottom don't have holes because I prefer to water from the bottom for these. They don't need a ton of moisture up top. And once I have the cuttings placed on top, I'm going to cover them with these domes, and I'm going to go put them under lights. Now, it has been the coolest watching this grow. What I've noticed though is when it's really happy, it will flower. There's a little flower right there, and I'll show you a close-up of these flowers too. It flowers so prolifically. The downside to that is when the flowers drop off, they make quite a bit of a mess, and it flowered a lot. So I was picking up the dried up flowers off of my windowsill and off my floor constantly. But that is a small price to pay, I think. So I'm going to cut the longest one first. That's going to reduce the length about 3 feet right off the bat. That was a little painful. Now this is going to give me a lot of propagation material though, and like I said, it can root from each one of the nodes, but they can also produce these little corms. I'm not quite sure what to call those, but there is an actual large thing right under here. I'll look up the proper, a round circular, a little bit like a corm or a bulb, I would say, but I'm not sure that's the proper term. And I've noticed a few really tiny ones on some of these leaf nodes. So we're going to look for those as we go. But what I've done It's growing this way. So this is the growing tip here. This is the bottom. I've got a nice healthy looking node. I'm going to clip the leaves off of 2 nodes. And then I'm going to clip it right on top of the 3rd set of leaves. And I'm going to bury 2 of them. So what I'm going to do is cut one piece that has 2, and 2 is minimum, 2 leaf nodes, 2 sets of leaves, and just lay it on top. And I'm going to do that twice more for each cell. Then we'll see how much of this plant is left over when I'm done. Now, I've done a few of these, and I want to take a quick break and show you the ones that I attempted to propagate in water. And it's not been a failure. You can see there's a lot of new growth. The new growth is not variegated at all, and there are quite a bit of little nubs under the water line that look like they're ready to grow roots, but they haven't. These were cut at the exact same time as these, and these have thoroughly rooted, or at least I think so. I'm tempted to tip out a pot and see. So I can tell that they've rooted because I can tug on them and they're not lifting off of the pot, but I think if I tip these out, a lot of the soil might fall away and make a big mess. So I'm not going to do that, but I am confident that they've rooted because they're not moving. But these ones, however, have not rooted at all. So they're not dead because they are growing, and they only started to grow this last week. So what I'm actually going to do with those, since there's only 3 strands in here, and actually while we're looking at this, just to show you how strong the root system of these can be, the roots have come right out of the bottom of this pot. And since this pot was a lot smaller than this one, this was just something that an orchid had come in. I filled the bottom with vermiculite, and the roots have come right out and started growing into the vermiculite. So that is a pretty significant root system that's gone out of this 4-inch pot right into the bottom and continued to grow down there too. So what I'm going to do is take these cuttings in water. I'm going to trim it back a little bit because I've got 2 nodes that are under the water, so I'm going to leave only 2 above. I'm going to put a little hole if I can. That is a good root system in here too. I'm going to try to put this in here, and that will help me fill out this existing plant too, because I'm not going to get rid of this one. There. And then I'm going to continue to do that with all of these ones too. So the lesson there is you can keep these alive in a glass of water, but they're not going to grow roots very quickly. So what we're hoping for is in a couple of months' time. Now it's the dead of winter right now, so I don't expect these to grow that much because our light levels are pretty low. But hopefully in a couple of months' time, this plant will be a little bit less annoying to deal with and a lot more lush. And yes, I will share updates as soon as there is a decent update to share. The care requirements is bright but indirect light. Now I've had mine sitting in an east-facing window which gets a good few hours of direct morning light. It has not scorched the leaves. In fact, it's resulted in gorgeous variegation. It has a lot of that pink purple tone. The green color on it is gorgeous. I'm going to show you some footage now that I took over the last week before I removed it from its window, but this is where it's lived for, best guess, about 6 months or so. And before that, it was in a much smaller pot hanging in a window on the same side of the house. So similar conditions. And do not pot this thing up before it absolutely has to. And you can tell that because it's drying out much quicker. If you feel the leaves, they are very soft and pliable when they need water. But if they are firm to the touch, even if the soil looks dry, just leave them alone. Any succulent plant is prone to root rot if it's overwatered, and it can always recover pretty well from being generally underwatered and ignored. So always err on that side rather than the overwatering side. Now it can grow perfectly happy even with a little bit less light or not quite in direct light, but you won't see quite as much of that nice pink variegation. It'll just be a little bit more on the green side, which is fine if you like that look. It might even just grow a little slower, not flower quite as much. And that's a great thing about growing plants indoors is it's generally much easier to manipulate the conditions to get the plant to react the way you want it to. But I absolutely adore this thing, and I can't believe how much it's grown. In most of this is the last year, actually. So I'm going to finish filling out all these pots. I'm going to get them back under lights. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.